here down here in Florida. I'm part of the Central Florida Semiconductor Coalition down here. There's also a few of my teammates on the call. I won't have them unmute or anything because it takes a long time. But I see Paul, Snack, Jen, and Nancy, all from our coalition. I think we have a few more coming in a little bit later. But today we're going to be focusing on finding funding. So we all have Build Back Better in some capacity, whether it's phase 1 or phase 1 and phase 2. So the idea is, how do you use Build Back Better as a catalyst for additional public funding? Now, before we go too far into this, I want you all to really think about your why. Right? Why do you do your work? What is your reason? What are you trying to accomplish? What is your why? The time we spend together today is really going to, again, focus on using Build Back Better as a catapult for additional funding, but every coalition has a why. You have something that is special to you on why you're doing your work. What is the point of getting additional funding? You know, what are you trying to accomplish? And that why needs to be at the core of everything you do and every message you send when you are looking for additional funding. So please keep that in mind as we go through everything today, because that needs to be at the core of everything you do. And that needs to be communicated, because if they don't know your why, they don't know your reason, and then why would they give you additional funding when they don't know your why? So to start this off, I want to explain a little bit about who we are at Central Florida Semiconductor. Why are we the ones giving this this webinar? Central Florida Semiconductor originally were these handful of organizations. These are our component project leaders and our sub-awardees. We have then expanded into 4 additional organizations on our board, and we are welcoming new partners every single day where it makes sense. We are also one of the fastest growing counties in the state of Florida. In the United States. We welcome about 1,000 new residents every week, so we're expanding pretty rapidly. But everything we do is really centered around Neo City. Neo City is a 500-acre master plan technology campus, and this is really the core of what we do. So it's not our why, but it is at the core of what we do. This is where we want to really have the emerging semiconductor industry based out of here in Osceola County. So when we talk about funding and investment, we talk about investments in Neo City, not just in this like generic coalition, right? So it helps if you can pinpoint to a building, a site, an like a very specific area that the funding is going to. If you have that, it's also really nice to be able to bring people out to come visit so they can see all your work within a couple different locations. So when we talk about investments at Neo City, we actually brought in over $500 million since 2018 in investment into Neo City, and that is from state, federal grants and appropriations, as well as federal contracts. And that is all either immediately prior to Build Back Better or post Build Back Better. I will say over half of this is post Build Back Better. But again, that is who we are, but what is ROI? And I could sit here and explain to you what ROI is, and I'm sure you guys would get it, but I think it'll hit home a little bit more if you hear about ROI from ROI. So just a short video.
One of the areas suffering the most is otherwise advertised as the happiest place on earth, the counties around Disney World and Orlando. Just on Highway 192, the road to Disney World, 67 motels house about 500 homeless kids. Jacob Braverman's family is going through it in one room. After they were evicted, their neighbors took them in. You think all this has changed you?
Yeah, and I haven't realized it, but I think I've gotten very mature in a very short amount of time.
All right, so Jacob here really is our why. So whenever we go after additional funding, whenever we talk about our work, yes, we'll talk about R&D. Yes, we talk about products and manufacturing and all these capabilities. But at the core of what we do, we always talk about our residents here in Osceola County. We talk about the children facing home insecurities. We talk about the adults facing resource insecurities. Everything we do is for them, and they are our why, and they help color everything we do. And we make sure that we express that as we go out and seek additional funding and as we talk about what we do to relevant stakeholders. So again, your why needs to be feeding through and weaving in and out of everything you do. And as you talk, to outside stakeholders, when you talk amongst your coalition, as you seek additional funding, your why needs to be weaved through it, and it needs to be weaved through in a coherent manner. So please keep that in mind as we go through. Now, the public funding opportunity process, there are a lot of concerns when it comes along with applying for public funding. One, it's a lot of competition among limited funding resources. Some of these funding opportunities are really complex in the application process. I'm sure we all remember what Build Back Better was like. And this can require coordination among a lot of different people, and sometimes that's hard to get, right? Some of these funding decisions may be influenced by political factors. And some of these large-scale funding opportunities are really big applications with relatively quick turnarounds, and that can be harder for a lot of smaller organizations. So as we go through today, a lot of what we talk about is going to be relevant to these concerns and kind of help you along your path. So these concerns aren't roadblocks for you. The public funding opportunity process, every opportunity is a little different, but every public funding opportunity has 3 phases: pre-award, award, and post-award. I'm going to kind of skirt through these pretty high level. There's a lot of information on these slides, and I put that in there for you because you guys will get this presentation sent out to you. But a lot of you are already kind of familiar with it through Build Back Better or other grants, so we're going to keep it high level for now. The pre-award phase is ultimately where they plan the opportunity, the funding agency announces it, you prepare your application, you submit it, and then there's the application review. All that is in this pre-award phase. In this phase, you're also going to identify project leads or coalition leads, and this can quickly turn some organizations sour. Some of them are like, hey, if I don't get to be a lead, I don't want to be part of this. You know, if I'm not a lead, then, you know, I don't have ownership over anything. So it's really important that as you go to different projects and different funding opportunities, be sure to allow different trusted organizations to take lead on different projects instead of it being the same 1 or 2 every single time. Also, depending on your resources and the application requirements for whatever funding opportunity you're going after, you may want to either procure or hire a grants writer. A grants writer, it is their entire job to help organizations apply and receive grant funding. So if you are running a lean, mean machine, that might be your best bet to help apply for some of these larger applications. During the application process, it's also ideal to schedule daily reoccurring coalition meetings. We recommend early in the morning, 8 or 9 o'clock start. I know that you're like, but honestly, that is as early as it needs to be because everyone's schedules look different. And everyone tends to keep that first hour or 2 of the workday a little bit freer. So that 8 or 9 o'clock daily morning, as much as it seems like it's a lot, it is extremely helpful, especially with some of these bigger applications that you need a lot of different organizational partners on. We did this with Build Back Better, and we've done it with every funding opportunity we've applied to since Build Back Better. And we have found it to be extremely, extremely helpful. Next is the award phase. That is where recipients are selected, recipients are notified, the funding agreement is signed, and you start your work. And then the post-award phase is where you continue your work, you're submitting your reporting. This is where we all are with Build Back Better for the most part if you got phase 2. And at the end, it's grant closeout. All right, so those are the different award phases. If you need to know more information about these, you can go through and look through these slides a little bit more in depth, but we're going to keep moving on. So now that you know the different award phases, how are you going to go about utilizing Build Back Better, and how are you even going to find different funding opportunities, right? So it is always a good idea to read through the 12 federal appropriations bills each fiscal year and all the reports that accompany those to get a good sense of which programs will be funded. So you kind of know what should be coming up so you can start preparing early. From there, you can follow department-specific opportunities. So example, DOE, NSF, EDA, all these different federal departments. You can sign up for the departmental listserv. So anytime they release a funding opportunity, you get an email. So if you know you need to do something in education, you can sign up for the DOE listserv, and then as soon as they have release a funding opportunity, you get an email. So you don't have to keep going back and checking either on a daily or weekly basis. Obviously, we all know the home for federal grants is grants.gov. And when it comes to state appropriations, obviously every state's going to be a little bit different. So I can't really tackle that too in depth. However, your state representatives are going to be your best first contact. They can and usually will give you a lot of guidance and put you on to potential funding opportunities. However, keep in mind, not all states are really keen on using appropriations for personal and general operational costs, but pretty much every state's good with funding capital expenditures and equipment. So you'll just need to kind of take a look at your state. And if you're not sure if they're comfortable with personal general operational costs being funded by appropriations, again, your state representatives are good people to ask. Also, for state grants, you should keep an eye on your state's grant or funding websites. Some states have one funding website that you can go to and look at that webpage. Other states, you have to go like department by department and look at what funding opportunities they have. So you'll just have to take that on a case-by-case basis. But again, those state representatives are your best first contact. And throughout this entire process, maintaining strong relationships is going to be the key to both learning about and receiving funding. For example, one way that we know we do this well is that there is a funding opportunity coming out. It's not even out yet, that it looks like it's going to be a good fit for us. And our government affairs director, Mike, who just hopped on the call, he actually got like 6-ish different phone calls and emails from different people, both in the state and outside of the state, saying, hey, I heard this is coming. I think it's going to be great for you guys. Please keep an eye on it. I think it's going to be good for you. Mike didn't even have to do anything because we already have such good, strong relationships. People around the country heard about this funding opportunity that's in the pipeline and said, Osceola County. And then they gave us a call, they sent an email, and it did a lot of that work for us. So again, those strong relationships are really going to be helpful. As you go through this, some strategies for success. One, you should totally and completely understand the funding guidelines and criteria for anything you apply to. Make sure you know what's going to be required of you is the key aspect there. Network with your stakeholders and funding agencies, whether that is your like regional partners or it's going to like funding the national funding agencies. Make sure your proposals are clear and articulate your project impact and align with your funding priorities. I'm sure most of us had this down because most of you guys got Build Back Better, if not all of you. And you should also be prepared to adapt your proposals and persist through the application process. So something you might find with some funding opportunities, you submit like a letter of interest and kind of a broad plan of what you would want to do. And you might get an email back or a call back from that funding agency saying, hey, we think there's room for you here, but you need to pivot a little bit. You need to be prepared to do that and not just take that as a failure. You also should be bringing in new and existing partners for each project where it makes sense. Collaboration ultimately is going to make this application process a lot easier, and it's going to create a stronger application for you. And that repeated collaboration is going to build more durable relationships, which then in turn is going to bring in more funding. Because the stronger your relationships are in your region and your state, the more likely you're going to get funding. Now, keep in mind that Build Back Better is not just an initial investment. That is not all it is for you. It is also a few other things. It is proof of faith from the federal government. If you got a state match for your Build Back Better grant, that is also proof of faith from your state government. It is proof of coalition relationships and strength. It is one way that you have gotten initial impact data. And it is ultimately a community showcase and how grant funding can impact your community in particular. So you should be able to say, hey, we got this from EDA, and this is what we've been able to do with it. So imagine what we can do with additional funding. It is one piece of the puzzle. It is one stepping stone. And as you go through and try to get additional funding, and you're using Build Back Better as like a stepping stone or a piece, one question you're going to need to ask is, how does your capital stack? So keep in mind, we can't just have Build Back Better and then this opportunity and this funding and then this program all separate, right? They all have to be connected, and they all have to be able to work with each other and work on top of each other. And remember, we don't want to be additive. We want to be multiplicative, right? We want each program and each funding piece that we get to multiply off of each other so we can have exponential impact, growth impact. This is one example that we use to show how our capital stacks. So you can see how all of our different funding that we've received has kind of built upon each other, right? And this is a much more visual way to show it. Obviously, you should have it written out as well because you'll need to put that in an application. But here you can see local investment, state investment, our Build Back Better is right in here, other investments, and as well as NSF engines. they all kind of come together in order to build something that realistically, you know, without our local investments, we wouldn't be able to have anything else that we have. So this is just an example for you, but just know that you need to be able to show how your capital will stack on top of each other, and how any additional funding you get will reflect on your Build Back Better award, and how that kind of grows. You should also be able to visually show your ecosystem. Now, for some of you, you can be able to do it like on one big visual. For others, your ecosystem is large, it's complex, and you might need to break it down a little bit. So here is a very simple, basic ecosystem map for Florida's semiconductor manufacturers and supply chain that was created by UF. And here's another example of workforce development ecosystem in our region. So these are just two examples for you, but having something visual to really show what your ecosystem looks like is going to be important. You should also have a generic pitch, right? So you should have something crafted that is pretty generic, it's pretty general, that you can then take and apply to any specific funding opportunity that you're going to go after, or that you can just take and inform somebody who's generally interested in what you're doing. So some of the things you're going to need to have in a generic pitch, you're going to need to have an introduction for your coalition. So who are your partners? Where are you located? What does your community look like? And what facilities do you have? You also need to let us know what are your problems, what are your solutions to those problems, your general overarching objectives and goals, who's your target audience, who's your beneficiaries, who are your stakeholders, what is your overall implementation plan? So what have you been able to do so far, and what do you hope to continue to do? Any successes that you've had. Build Back Better is a common success that we've all had. What is your ask? So what do you still need? So I've told them so far what I've already been able to do, what I hope to do. What do I still need to be able to complete what I would like? And most importantly, if I get what I want, what happens? What does that look like? If I get that additional funding, how's that gonna impact my community? How's it gonna impact a specific private sector industry, etc.? You need to show your budget. So you need to have, you know, the money we've already gotten, how we are spending that money, the money we would like to get, how we would spend that. And then lastly, you need to address the sustainability and how you guys are going to continue past the funding you already have. That is extremely important because no agency is going to want to give funding to an organization that they think might not exist in 2 years, right? But throughout all of this, you need to kind of keep 4 things in mind. One, you need to be highlighting people. Again, your why almost always is going to delineate down at its core to people. How are you impacting people? And how are people impacting your projects? So throughout all this, highlight people, reinforce your coalition and how strong of a relationship and all the work you guys have done together. Showcase all your successes throughout all of these, not just in number 6. Those successes can be small, like a small little event, or it can be really large, like getting a big funding opportunity like Build Back Better. Also, connecting to broader issues is always also really important. So being able to connect the problems that you're trying to face in your community, in your kind of smaller region, to problems that either your state or the nation or the world are facing is also extremely important. For example, when we talk about the semiconductor industry in Florida, we always try to connect it to 2 national issues. One, national defense, because it is better for the military and the government if chips are manufactured domestically rather than abroad, and the resurrection of the manufacturing economy here in the United States and the manufacturing built middle class. Those are 2 kind of broad issues that we always connect to. So if you can connect to something either with your state or the nation or the world, that's also going to kind of show like a bigger impact. Do not be afraid to strengthen and expand your coalition. Keep in mind your coalition should not stop actively communicating, coordinating, cooperating once you get money, right? Just because you got your money doesn't mean you guys get to stop talking to each other. You should really consider establishing regular meeting cadence for the entire coalition. So Build Back Better does have some type of requirement, but it's going to be a little different depending on your coalition. Not what is easy for your coalition, but what your coalition actually needs and what works for your coalition. So for some coalitions, quarterly meetings make sense. For others, every other month or monthly or weekly, whatever works. For us, we have an official board meeting once a month that is in person. And then we also have bi-weekly project meetings among the coalition, and then individual projects each meet among different coalition members once a week. So we got a bunch of different stuff going on, but we're always communicating. If you stop communicating, if you stop coordinating with each other, you stop cooperating with each other, your coalition ultimately is going to crumble, because people are not going to feel like they have ownership of any work. They're not going to want to help. And when the next funding opportunity comes, they might not be so eager to hop on and join and support. Now, that being said, you should also consider expanding your coalition where it makes sense. Now, I know for a lot of us, it can be a little frustrating when, hey, you didn't hop on in the application, and now that we've got money, now you want to be part of this. I know that can be a little frustrating, but if it makes sense and they can really help your work and help your projects move forward, consider letting them join. Please try not to gatekeep just because they didn't hop on in the application phase. Not just expanding your coalition is helpful, but also expanding how you guys work together. Really think of, okay, so we're already doing this. What else can we do together? And who else among us can help lead something? Contemplate new projects and show up for each other. When y'all have events, show up to your partners' events. When your partners have a success story, share that success story. Revel in their success together. Ultimately, a united front is going to be a strong base, and a strong base is going to enhance collaboration and communication and just make your life so much easier, especially in complex applications. Some of the ways that you can show up for each other, again, share your partner's successes. That can be simple as like reposting a story that they put out. It can also mean that when one of your partners signs a new agreement that brings in new people, that you kind of show them around, let them know that what you're doing, take the time out of your day for these new people. It can also mean, again, showing up to each other's events. Regardless of whether you receive an award, whether you get the money or not, it is also important to think and follow up with any supporters who signed on to the application or supported you in any way. That includes coalition partners, additional organizations, elected officials, etc. The main point I want you to leave with when it comes to this is do not let your work leave their mind. They should be thinking about you even when you're not talking to them. You can do this by giving them consistent updates, letting them know, hey, this is what we're doing, or hey, we're having this event. Can you come down if you have a free time? Or hey, if you don't have free time, do you want to send a video introducing somebody? Do you want to be part of this in any way? We would love to have you, etc., etc. Make sure that they understand that you want them to be part of your work in some capacity, even if you didn't get funding. When it comes to lobbying, all coalitions should have a few items available for stakeholders and legislatures. We find that 3 items in particular are really helpful. 1, a short brief, a broader brochure and a packet, and lastly, a document outlining your appropriations request for the upcoming fiscal year. And I do have examples for you. So the overview brief, this is just the example I have up on here is the first page of one of our briefings. This can be 1 or 2 pages. It can be front and back, or it can just be one-sided, whatever you like. But it should contain your branding, your location, the history of your initiative, which again should include your why. Why are you doing this? The work being done, any successes you've had, and in particular, any local investments that have already been made. That's especially true for federal agencies or Congress people. And again, this is just like the front page. You can see it's mostly words, got a few pictures, got some branding. Great, front page. The brochure packet is going to go into a lot of the same things the brief does, but it's going to be a lot more image heavy, and it should be a lot kind of cleaner and more put together. You should include any website and contact information, and there should be a call to action there for any of your relevant parties. So if you're trying to expand industry, then maybe your call to action is to industry partners. If you're trying to rebuild a workforce, maybe your call to action is with potential students or with institutes of higher education. As an example here, this is 1 page of a brochure that Orlando Economic Partnership, one of our partners, put together. This one kind of goes into who we are. And then this is another page that kind of walks through how all of our different partners and programs work together for one person to get to a new career path. So again, very image heavy. Lastly is the appropriations request. This document, it can be kind of whatever you want it to be. It can be 1 page, it can be more in depth, but it should have a few different things. It should have the history of the initiative, which again should have your why in there somewhere, your location, the issue being addressed, and the funding request and amount. So you can see here at the bottom, we laid it out. Make it as simple as possible for a legislator to know exactly what they need to support and exactly what you need. The easier you make for them, the more likely they're going to do it. And if you at all have any interest in what we're doing, you can scan this QR code, find our website, find our socials. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can email me. I put my email there at the bottom. We here in Central Florida understand it takes a village to build anything. And we are more than happy and willing and want to be part of your village. So if you ever just need somebody to bounce something off of, have a question, maybe you want to know if we have an additional resource, please feel free to either contact us generally or send me an email. More than happy to help out and be part of your village. And we do also have time for questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. That was amazing. I think just to say, I really love the peek into the nitty-gritty of how your coalition's keeping together, communicating, governing, like what time you're meeting, how often you meet, like what has worked for y'all. And also definitely the continued connection to the why, in particular, highlighting like a particular person or a face or a story. So that's really what people relate to, understand, feel motivated by. So it's really great that y'all are doing that consciously, intentionally building it into your work. So yeah, I just want to open it up for questions. I know we've got quite a few coalitions represented on the call. Anything resonate with folks? Things you want to ask more details about? Sarah?
I'm not part of a coalition, but I thank you, Sarah. Just for everybody, I am Sarah Lawrence, and I lead the Building Better Regions community practice, and that was fantastic. So thank you so much for sharing out to you and the Osceola County Coalition. As Jess said, I love the level of big picture vision, but with the nitty gritty, because these are all where so much of these points are surfacing, and to kind of dive right in there. You had this, I've never seen such a great, I'm going to call it the money slide, titled generic at the top. But your generic pitch slide I thought was fantastic. And I wanted, as were the others, but when you, on that slide, you were talking about, no, I'm sorry, it was that slide, but there was another slide you had before that. There was another one you had before where you were talking about your teams. And about what I heard was you were talking about bringing your teams together, and you talked about this throughout actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know how teamwork is hard, especially when you put a lot of money at the, in the middle of the table. And so just curious how you and Osceola County set those norms for that team, having that team mindset over, that individual or specific organization mindset to kind of capture their, share of the pie, if you will, versus maintaining that team mindset, or we could call it regional orientation. How did you do that? I know you don't flip a switch and that happens overnight, but I'd love to hear more about how that was baked into the process and the relationships.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is intentionality and being mindful of what our partners need and would like. It's making sure we share in that power structure as well. So it's not just, it's easy to let the local government kind of lead everything, but that's not the most beneficial way to do it all the time. So there's times when Osceola County can lead and it makes sense, but then there's times where UCF can lead and it makes sense, or Skywater, which is one of our private partners, can lead and it makes sense. Or Florida High Tech Corridor is on the call. If they can lead something and it makes sense for them to do so, it's not being afraid to trust your partners with different initiatives. It's allowing our partners to really help mold the narrative behind our team and kind of go about their own way of promoting our work and what we're doing. It's also making sure, again, that you show up for each other. When this picture right here on the far right was a Florida High Tech Corridor event, that the county showed up to, that Bridge showed up to, that OEP showed up to, that a lot of our partners came to. And it's making sure that, you know, when they are doing something, whether or not it's directly related to our work, it's showing up for them and showing that you care, showing that you're invested in their success. Because why would they be invested in the team success if no one's invested in their individual success as well? So I think it's a lot of that intentionality. It's a lot of that work. It's a lot of really making sure that we're partners in things, and it's not one person telling everyone else what to do or what's going to happen.
If I could go just a little deeper, that's I think really helpful. I'd love to hear what, you know, how would you, if you were writing job descriptions for you key I'm going to say, you know, coalition participants, and you can take yourself out of Osceola County and put yourself in, you know, county, you know, XYZ. What would be the skills and competencies that you would want to look for to fill these important positions, to be part of a coalition pursuing these bigger, larger funding opportunities? And you can take out funding, just larger opportunities for your region. What would you define as those skills and competencies that have really been critical for Osceola County and the leadership you have there?
I think one of the best skills would be the ability to kind of pull yourself out and see the bigger picture. So a lot of those like fine-tuned day-to-day things, you need people that can do that. But ultimately, the decision makers, the people that are going to be the ones deciding how much manpower is going to go into it, or how much money is going to go into it, how much they're going to put their logo and their name on something. A lot of that has to do with people that can really take themselves out of their individual organization and see the bigger picture. And they can understand the why, they can understand the impact, they can understand that, hey, is this the most, you know, money, like profit producing venture ever? Maybe not. But does it have a gigantic impact on the community that I live in? Is this going to create better standards of living for my existing employees and my future employees? Am I going to see the strength of, you know, the entire industry increase? I think those people in particular have been extremely helpful. Also, people that know how to not get lost in details. So yes, this might be over budget, but bigger picture, can we make it work? People that are, again, mindful of a communication strategy. So having that idea of how is it best to portray what we're doing, right? Because a big thing of what we're all doing is we need that community buy-in. We need the people that live where we live to buy into what we're doing. So people with a good understanding of public communications and like PR, I guess, has also been extremely helpful.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah, for those questions, and Sarah for the answers. And you both spell Sarah the same way. Other thoughts from folks in attendance? Give folks a minute or two to think about questions.
If you have any like particular questions on finding funding or kind of navigating lobbying, our government affairs director is also on the call. So he's a great resource if you have any questions about that. Sorry, Mike, I'm kind of throwing you out there.
Mike, I have talked to not Build Back Better regions, but other regions through our work with RTI, who are very skeptical about leaning into their government relations team for assistance with these kinds of opportunities. And I'm wondering what you would say to those folks who are pursuing large place-based opportunities like this.
It really depends on what you're going after. So if you're going after a National Science Foundation award, always be careful, because the NSF, they typically don't like having the interference of Congress. However, if you're going after, for example, a Department of Commerce, an EDA project, absolutely include your members. Make sure that they're aware, the senators. You want to make sure that they have situational awareness because, you know, a congressman or senator might bump into the assistant secretary or one of the secretaries for whichever department you may be applying for. And it's good for them to know. So in the event that they have a 10-minute opportunity to talk, that they do flag that it's important in their district. And the reason why it's important for these departments to know that there's support from these legislators, it's because the legislators control those departments' budgets. And they always want to make sure that they're helping out the legislators and that the legislators are helping out the departments. Because again, they can't lobby Congress. The only thing that they're legally allowed to do is to provide the budget justification in the president's budget. Everything after that, any type of grant opportunity or funding opportunity, that making sure that the legislators are connected on that, it helps the department, it helps everyone in the big picture. That's where I would always start. But yes, it is helpful to have the government affairs team to know, and depending on where you are in the process. So if you've already submitted an application, that's the time to really reach out and ask for a letter of support. If you know that it's getting further along in the decision-making process, that's another good opportunity to circle back with the member office or the senators to let them know, hey, we're this far in the process. Now, of course, politics comes into play, but it's always good for situational awareness that these, the legislators, that the senators, the congressmen, that they know what you're working on, because that also determines their individual office appropriation requests as well. So it's good all around that they have situational awareness, and you could defer to your government relations team on what level of involvement they should have. They have an entire toolbox. And I always like to use the example of golf clubs. Sometimes you need a driver, sometimes you need a putter. And it's really up to the situation that determines which one you use. So that's my 2 cents.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I see a thumbs up from Sarah. Right. Any questions from others in attendance or others from the Florida Semiconductor team just wanting to add a bit about, perspective from your role or just to add on?
Hey, I'll jump in. Paul Soul, CEO of the High Tech Corridor. Some things you ought to know. One is Sarah is one of our most junior folks, and she does just an amazing job pulling us senior old timers like together on stuff, which is hugely important, as you heard. To Mike's point, and Sarah Lawrence, a great question. If you don't engage your government relations team, and I watch Mike Nicola do this and I am not in this world, but I watched him navigate those halls. If you don't engage your government relations, government affairs folks, you do it at your own peril, because you don't know what kind of third rail you're going to step on that can blow it apart. The other thing I would share is, and it was the great question on the kinds of people you need on coalitions. Sarah said it exactly right. And I would add, Florida, I think, and I've been here now for 4 years, is unique in that, number one, there aren't a whole lot of people from this area, which means they're very curious about what others are doing. And so it's very much a growth mindset, kind of a, hey, what is that? What are you doing? As opposed to, this is my puka, don't come close. And I can see it kind of across the 23 counties, and it happens all the time in this semiconductor coalition as this team has grown together. And what's exciting now is how then we're building more partners as Build Back Better expands to NSF Engine and how that grows. It's just amazing. So as a partner on this team, it's been fabulous to see what Build Back Better resources have done, what other resources that come in have done. It's phenomenal for Jacob Braver. That's who we're working for.
Thanks,
I
Paul.
also think I want to note, because I didn't mention it earlier, having different partners lead different things. One, it helps kind of intertwine you guys a whole lot more than if it's just one person. But it also is a way to kind of give you a check and balance. So, you know, if there's one entity, i.e., a couple people leading every single thing you do, you're risking something going wrong. When there's more hands in the pot, more people taking lead, more people making decisions, cooperating, you're more likely to have those check and balance. You're less likely to run into a problem where somebody made a misstep and it didn't get corrected or anything like that. And that's, I think, another thing that we've made sure we've done.
Awesome. I think I saw maybe Steve unmute. I don't know if I wanted to give you a chance if you wanted to hop in.
It was an accidental unmute, but I would like to say something.
Okay,
Thank you,
perfect.
Jessica. I did want to just add, and Sarah just hit on it a little bit, is kind of this mindset of diversity of thought. And even though there is some reluctance to try to let too many people into the kind of coalition where your focus and your drive towards hitting the mission is potentially going to get slowed down a little bit, and sometimes you're under the crunch to get things done. But if you can establish a coalition where there is ability to access lots of diversity of thought in lots of different organizations, there's one thing is building that diversity of thought. Two is you build the coalition of the willing that are willing to join in and help out, and it makes a difference when they happen to talk to their congressman or they're up in DC and they run into the EDA or something like that. So I think that's super helpful, and Osceola County and leading this coalition has done a great job of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve. I love how, this webinar is called, finding funding, but, we're talking about so much more diversity of thought and all of the above. It's really goes to show, how much of a team effort and how much goes into finding funding. Keeping it open for additional questions and thoughts. Things that resonate. Or you thought, oh, my team doesn't do it like that at all. My team does it like this.
I have one more question for Osceola County. So given your successful track record, what's next? Is it sustaining? I mean, there must be so many moving pieces going on and managing that, but how do you take this excellent presentation and what are you all orienting towards?
So we've continued to expand really. So we really have not kind of lifted our foot off the gas pedal since we got Build Back Better. We got NSF engines. We got a Florida Job Growth Grant to build a new multi-purpose lab at Neo City. I know the high tech corridor, we're looking at an opportunity. UCF, the coalition just all kind of came together really quickly in a matter of a few weeks to help UCF put together an application for a NIST opportunity to potentially build a really cool looking digital twin lab here at Neo City. So it's really just continuing to expand while we also finish our current projects and kind of working through that. I think moving forward, continuing to get additional infrastructure in place, continuing to collect data, and really continuing to expand our workforce work as well as our kind of regional private company partners as well. Doing a lot of that kind of human side of the work as well, I think is going to be a big thing moving forward. And we also, kind of the way we've kind of created what we're doing here between Build Back Better and engines in particular, is creating a good case study that can then be taken and applied to other locations. That was kind of our goal, is that, you know, when we kind of get a little bit farther along, other regions can look at us and we can be a good example of how to kickstart a new manufacturing industry in a location where none of that existed before. Because before Build Back Better and before NeoCity, we were agriculture and we were tourism and we supported, you know, Disney and the theme parks. And that is what we had here. And now we have a burgeoning tech industry, kind of out of nowhere. And that can be such a great starting off point for other locations around the country to do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. I'm gonna put some links in the chat to our LinkedIn group for people to join. We have a new kind of private, we have a LinkedIn page for the community of practice where we share your stories, but we also have a new LinkedIn group that we're encouraging people to join so that you can connect with each other. And so, you know, after this grant funding ends essentially, or the RTI's time running the community practice ends, we'll have some ways for people to continue to connect. And one of them is through this LinkedIn group and through SSTI. And so I put that link in the chat. Please, you know, go ahead and join that group. And I'm also going to put into the chat the link to the Google form that I mentioned earlier to please submit videos of yourself talking about, just for 30 seconds, the work from the last couple of years, what you've got out of it, what the biggest impact has been. Even like a selfie is great. We're going to stitch them together. Can be very casual as long as we can see your face and it's not just, you know, your mouth. So that link's in there. And I'll just leave like 10 seconds if anybody has any final questions to say them now. All right, going once, going twice, going 3 times. I see a thank you in the chat. All right. Thank you all so much, Sarah and Paul, Steve, Jen, everybody on the team. Thank you so much for joining. And thanks everybody else for joining too. See you soon.